What can that be? Could that be? Could that be? Oh, yes, it is. The Sega Saturn. And yes, I have one. And I'm sorry if I haven't been uploading videos, this is the same reason. Also, I just been bored, so I have lots of time on my hands right now, so let's just get ahead right into this review. Okay, so here's some kind of history behind it. Okay, the thing was in development, I think it was like in 1992 or something, but it came out in Japan in 1994, and it came out here and Europe in 1995. And many retro gamers know, well, and a lot of people know that this thing had a surprise launch here, and it did in America. Like, because in Japan it launched. It was popular. This console was very popular in Japan. It was not really popular here, and it was really not, and it was definitely not popular in Europe. Consoles are usually never that popular in Europe for some reason. But yeah. So basically, this thing, like, this thing was supposed to be a 2D monster, basically. Like, the way it was designed, it had a Hitachi SH2 processor. It had I think it had like one at first, and it had like its own dedicated graphics processor, and it had its own dedicated sound, like a bunch of other stuff like that. Like, this thing was, if you try to compete with this thing in 2D, you're probably not going to win. At least consoles from this generation, modern consoles can easily outdo this thing. But at the time, this thing was very viable with that. But along the way, in '94, everything, the PlayStation, they revealed the PlayStation, and that thing, Sega didn't know that 3D gaming and polygonal gaming was becoming the future. They thought sprites and everything would stay around, so that's why this thing was designed to be very powerful with that. So they saw that, and like a last minute decision. Like, I think it was like a few months before they released this thing in Japan or America somewhere. I think no, it was Japan, or else it would have been different in Japan. They decided to add another processor to the thing, and it helped with 3D, but even with that, this thing was still not very great at 3D. And on top of that, that made the thing very hard to program for. And instead of using triangles like just about every other thing used for polygons, this thing uses quadrilaterals, basically squares. So did the Dreamcast, I think, but the Dreamcast made it really easy to use that. But so it was really hard to develop for people. People always get confused with saying, like, remember they had Yu Suzuki's quote that said 1 out of 100 people would be able to really use this thing, like develop this thing. He isn't saying that only 1 out of 100 people can develop for it. Anybody could probably develop for this thing, but he said 1 out of 100 people could get like the full power out of this thing. Most people did not get the full power because this thing was capable of quite a bit. Not as much as the PlayStation, at least in terms of 3D. This thing had a lot in 2D. 3D, this thing was alright. It's playable, but nothing spectacular. People say it doesn't have transparencies. It does, but it has to have it can do it, but you have to have an external program to be able to do that. Burning Rangers was a game that had it. You could see in the fire. The PlayStation did that with no problems. But when it comes to 2D, it's kind of funny. The PlayStation couldn't do 2D. The way they did it, I heard, they got 2 triangles, like the polygons, and basically, and they put the textures on there. It makes it look like there's 2D, but it's actually just 3D and texture mapping just going, pretty much. It doesn't really do 2D as well. It looks probably comparable to a Super Nintendo, probably. Or early 32-bit systems like the Amiga CD32 or the FM Transporter. That's what the PlayStation can do in 2D. This thing can outdo all those, probably even the N64. And, yeah, so then, to the surprise launch. So in America, they basically, again, it's 95. This thing was supposed to be released about the same time as the PlayStation in America, like September. But Sega being Sega, making their crazy decisions, really questionable ones, they decided, it's probably going to be a good idea to release this thing really early. That was not a good idea, because games are still being in development, like Daytona USA. That's a good example, because Daytona USA runs at a really weird frame rate. It runs at around 20. It's very playable. It's still a very good game, but you can just tell it was rushed. It could have been better, but pretty much it was released in May, and it wasn't released to all retailers either. Oh yeah, sorry, I just stand up because my leaf's starting to hurt. But yeah, it wasn't released to all the retailers. Walmart wasn't included. It was like 3 or 4. So retailers are pretty peed off. They're pretty mad. I don't want to cuss on YouTube because I might get a bad rep. But so pretty much, and it surprised everybody. Like people was already starting to lose faith in Sega after the CD came out. The Sega CD said, every console manufacturer makes a mistake. The 32X, which came out a year before this thing, and they stopped supporting it right when this thing came out. So yeah, people were really mad. They really couldn't trust them. I mean, a lot of people did. I mean, in Japan, people loved this thing. In America, this thing only sold like 2 million consoles here in America. It sold like 7 million plus in Japan. I think like less than 1 million in Europe, and I don't know about Brazil, because the Master System and everything was very popular in Brazil. And I don't know about the Saturn. And it's really, people talk about the Dreamcast being underrated, but this thing is even more. Like, this thing didn't even sell as well. The Dreamcast, people make games for it today. This thing, people just like walk by and it's like, whatever. But yeah, and lost a lot of developers. But I mean, they fixed it with the Dreamcast, but that's a different story, and I probably already talked about it. So yeah, it's a really good console, I think. And the only thing you really have to do to really play imports on this thing is you get an action replay. You stick it into this cartridge slot right here. Well, I'm gonna have to turn on the fan. I mean, not the fan, the light. No, that'd be funny if there's a fan on my phone. But see, the cartridge slot. And no, what most people think, you cannot play Mega Drive games or Genesis games in here. That's only for memory, pretty much. And those are really, really cheap connectors too. They break really easy. They come loose like really easy. I don't have one. This thing has built-in memory, pretty much. 32 kilobytes. That's it. Built-in memory like that. I mean, that's enough for a few little games, but if you want to say sports games, well, for some reason sports games always are big, and Virtual Fighter or something, you're out of luck. I mean, you can save them, and that's about it. I mean, I only have like 6 games, and I mean, I only have 4 of them saved onto there. I'm already like halfway through the memory. It has like 600 blocks, but they have memory card. They have like 1 meg memory cards, which doesn't sound like a lot today, but back then that was a pretty good amount. And I'm sure it's one above that, but I'm planning on getting one. So anyways, let's just look at the console. And yes, this video will be a part 2, just because I wanted to talk about it, and I'm just really excited. So, okay, you see the front of it. This is the Model 1, by the way. I forgot to tell that. Because the Model 2, you can tell, it's very easy to tell which one's which. You don't even have to look at anything. It's just, if you see these buttons, it's a Model 1. If you see like round buttons, it's Model 2. And you can just tell, like, the Model 2 will have the Sega logo right here, right there. And it looks slightly different. I personally like, I personally like the look of this one. I like it a lot better. That's the Sega's. It's just got the signature Sega look to it. Like, yeah, I'm a freaking awesome console, and I dare you to mess with me. I'm a Sega. Well, the Model 2 is like, yeah, we're losing money. We got to make a cheap model. Pretty much is what it screams. So yeah, and I remember when I first saw this, I'm like, that looks like HDMI ports. I mean, yeah, they're not. I wasn't surprised at all, but they look like it. And I think I already showed you with the controller one, but yeah, and just like the Dreamcast, they slide in like really well. You don't need to really use 2 hands. It's a little bit easier with 2 hands. It's just a lot easier, but you can use 1 hand and it gets open. Okay, I'll do it. The top of it, as you can see, it says power. That's where the power button is. You would turn that, and you do that. And that's how you turn it on. This is the reset button. And that's power and access. That's the power light, and this is the access, like when it's going to the CD drive. And there it is. I mean, that's the inside of it. I haven't been able to really take the single part. This thing is very complex on the inside. The Model 2 is not, but this one is. Okay, anyways. Yeah, I forgot to point something out. I didn't notice that on the controller board. It's just, oh god, it's really unfocused. Control 1 and Control 2. I want to watch this control. It's like full of English mistakes. English, yeah, I said English. It's not English, it's English. And these vents, this thing doesn't really get hot. And the thing is bigger than the Dreamcast. I'll show you the comparison between that and a PlayStation, I mean. And this is where the battery cover goes, and hopefully the battery doesn't die. But I heard unplugged, this thing will last about a month. Pretty much on that. Okay, it's kind of hard to get, so I'll do it off camera. Okay, so here's, like, there's the battery, and you don't want to take that off when it's off. You don't want to take the battery out, because or else you wipe all your memory. That's the problem with it. The RAM in here, where you save your games onto, if you take the battery out, or if it goes dead, you're screwed. This thing, like, it loses all your memory. That's why it's good to get a memory card. Yeah, so I'll just leave that on there, and then I'll put it back on after this. Where's the power supply? Just like any old one, I guess the two-prong. Most people think that's the same one as like the PlayStation 4 and the original Xbox. It is basically, in general, the same thing, but the thing is, see right here, how it's got a little, it's straight right there? While on theirs, it'd be like completely like an oval. That's the thing. So if somehow you cut it, it would work, but it's pretty much the same exact type. Here's a, I think that's a communication connector. I don't know what that's been, I don't think that's ever really used. And that's the video cable. And it looks kind of, yeah, that's kind of looks like an S video cable, but it's not. It's bigger, by the way. And here's the thing right there. It's 120 volts. It's a lot more than the, you know, yeah, that's way more than the Genesis. The Genesis is like 10 volts, or at least the Model 2 is. And is the bottom of it. Like modern consoles don't have these vents because they already have fans, but a lot of these older consoles have vents, and that's where the dust gets into there. Even though there's no fans in this thing. Do not open. Yeah, blah blah blah. Do whatever the heck you want. And of course, it uses Phillips head screwdrivers to open the thing up. So well, let me show you what the games might look like. Well, here's what a Sega Saturn game case looks like. I just put these right next to it so you can kind of see where it came from. I mean, they had game cases before this, but Sega's really the first one, these plastic ones that last a long time. It's Virtua Racing. And my Genesis, I got the video cables for it now, but now the power cable's messed up. Yeah, bad luck. Bad luck, Brian. Except my name's not Brian. But, yeah. And, you see, it looks like a DVD case, but that's what a DVD case size would look like. See, it's a good bit bigger, but bigger, not bitter. But, I think the Panasonic 3DO had bigger cases than that. Like some of those older consoles with CDs, the Panasonic 3DO had like some of the bigger ones. Besides the Neo Geos, there's a reason why Neo Geo cases are big, because the cartridges themselves are like probably about as big as the whole entire Sega Saturn. Not a stick, but as big. That's how big a Neo Geo cartridge is, pretty much. It's really big. But yeah, and I also just put Xbox because, in my opinion, the Xbox is pretty much the kind of like the kid, or like the son of the Dreamcast. And kind of like, you can just, the controllers look the same, pretty much the ideas, they're kind of innovating, but, I mean, Sega really innovated at its time. Sega nowadays doesn't really innovate all that much. But, yeah, let me show you what the inside of the case would look like. Yeah, so here's what the inside of the case, like, you have the manual right here. Oh yeah, that's one thing I really love about these older games. I mean, it's kind of sad you don't see these nowadays. You don't see manuals. If you open up the case for Minecraft, you don't see anything but just a disc. I mean, what happened? Is it just going all digital? Like, well, technically, yes, and that's kind of sad. Gonna miss these, but I think in the future, they're gonna go to little, like, DS cards. That's besides the point. I'll make a video, probably, just my idea for the future of gaming, and what my game console would be like. And if anybody's wondering what this game is, Sky Target, it's pretty much like a sequel to, kind of like a spiritual successor to Afterburner. But, yeah, I'll review it. It's a really fun game, actually. So, yeah, and then you just take the back of it and the side. I've heard that actually, in some games, the logo is reversed. Like, it's upside down, pretty much. Like, you see the shiny part on that, Sega Saturn globe on the bottom. So, yeah, it's kind of funny. But, yeah. And it's kind of funny how this thing kind of dwarfs the CD. I'll show you what I mean. See what I mean? Like, look at this. Look, I mean, it's not a heavy console. I mean, it's kind of funny. This thing is actually just a tiny bit heavier than the the PlayStation 1. I kind of see this as kind of like the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4. I'll talk about that later. Okay, I want to just show you the size comparison between other consoles. So here's the size comparison between that and the Dreamcast. And, yeah, I'll show you between the PlayStation next. And, yeah, here's the size comparison between the PlayStation 1. Yeah, I like the look of that better.
And here's how easy it is to put it into there. Oh, there we go.